So today we're going to do the last part of our lesson, talking about Napoleon falling from grace, basically losing his position as emperor, and then basically what happens to France after that. Now, if you guys remember yesterday, we had just talked about the failed campaign in Russia. We had talked about the issue of the blockade against Great Britain and how that turned against the French. Today we're going to be talking about the repercussions of the failed campaign in Russia and basically what happens to Napoleon moving forward. So after the failed campaign in Russia, the Allied forces are going to push back against France. And then once they get into French territory, there's kind of this upheaval that happens with Napoleon. Essentially, he is taken out of power and then exiled to this island of Elba. Now, the only thing you guys have to know about that is that Elba is kind of a small, secluded island. This was seen as a punishment. Essentially, you can't rule here anymore. You need to go and be kind of alone in your own little island where you can't cause trouble. Again, because he was such a popular figure, because he was such a strong and prominent character, you have to keep him secluded, because basically the thinking was if you let him stay in the country, he would claim power again. He had enough of a following. Now, after he's exiled, Louis XVI's younger brother, which would be Louis XVIII, is going to be put back onto the throne. So again, if you're looking at France in the long con, if you're looking at it in the entire history so far, we have gone from an absolute monarch to back to Louis XVI's brother back in charge. Have we really progressed? Some of the law codes that Napoleon had are still sticking around, but now, again, you have another Louis in charge. Now, of course, they like Napoleon, they don't like Louis, because he's, again, a representation of the absolute monarchs that they hated for the longest time. And Napoleon manages to get back into France. He's carried back over on ship. He comes back in, and he gets to be emperor again. They bring him up, his soldiers support him, and he's able to rise up, and they oust Louis XVIII. This is his last bid. This was the last chance that he had to make something of himself, to rekindle the greatness that he once had. Well, unfortunately, the British are going to attack. They see Napoleon as a weaker leader. He's on his last leg, and they see him as this threat to Europe. So they're going to attack again. Well, when you have Austria and Great Britain, two very strong empires, attacking somebody who is just barely holding on to the edges of his empire, it's not a equation for success. And essentially, once they get to the Battle of Waterloo, the British are going to decimate the French. And again, every single victory gains them land in the empire. Well, every single victory seems to tear the empire in half. So when the British are victorious in the Battle of Waterloo, it ends Napoleon's bid. And just for good measure, they decide to send him to another remote island where he is going to die of what they say is either syphilis, some kind of food poisoning, or some kind of viral infection. It's kind of up in the air, some interpretations. Essentially, they send him to an island where he is going to die alone. Now, if you guys see, this is one of my favorite photos of Napoleon, because it really does show the frustration and kind of struggle that he's having. It also kind of looks like me after I've had my third Pop-Tart, right? It's just one too many, and you're just a little upset that you made that choice. Now, here's a little diagram of the Battle of Waterloo. We're not really going to go into this, but if you're looking at it, you have the British on the left side here, you have the Austrians on the right side here, and the French that are trying to make a flanking maneuver. Essentially, what happens is they just try to flank the British and then are attacked from the back from the Austrians. So it's just a bad fight for them. It's basically, when people talk about this, they talk about it as this overstepping, essentially showing that Napoleon is not this clear-headed man. He's what you would say is tilted. He is kind of trying to fight against somebody. He knows that this is going to be a tough battle, so he tries to take a big risk, and it doesn't pay off. Now, what happens following this defeat, following Waterloo, and with Napoleon being kicked out, is that there is an Austrian diplomat named Metternich Okay. He is going to lead the Congress of Vienna to try to bring stability back to Europe. Essentially, what's happening is Europe has been broken apart by these empires, by Napoleon specifically just trying to dominate as many countries as possible. And they realize that if they don't have a kind of come together moment where Europeans can agree on some kind of peace plan, that there's just going to be constant fighting. Because again, we're in 1814. So Europe has been fighting with itself for the last 50 years continuously. There has not been a year, to my knowledge, there has not been a year where there has not been two countries fighting for territory. Well, with a half a century of fighting, eventually somebody is going to be calling for peace. And that's what the Congress of Vienna is. It is trying to bring a balance to Europe. It's trying to restore some of the powers, some of the monarchies that have been taken over and kicked out because of France. And it's trying to check France's power. That's really the big push here, is to get France back under control. Now, here's a map of Europe before. Again, you have the expansion of the French Empire going all the way to the Grand Duchy of Warsaw. And then you have what is broken up here with what the Congress of Vienna does. Okay, they split up the Grand Duchy of Warsaw. They give Prussia a little bit more land. They're going to take over and kind of split up the Confederation of the Rhine. Again, the Confederation of the Rhine was an ethnic group of, a basically ethno-confederation. It was a group of different ethnicities that were just kind of smushed together and turned into one empire in a way. Now you're going to see the Netherlands come out of this. You're going to see Prussia expand, Saxony, Bavaria. You're going to see Austria expand, which is going to be a factor later. And you're going to see some of the Italian kingdom split up a little bit farther. So Parma and the Kingdom of Sardinia is going to expand as well. So essentially, we're kind of breaking up these groups into smaller ethnic or cultural groups, which in some cases will be productive. In other cases is going to cause more fighting. And we'll talk about that on another day, though.